developed the ability to fly. Okay, let me make sure I press the right thing. Here we go. The ground-up theory assumes that they were fleet-footed ground dwellers that captured prey by leaping and flapping their upper limbs. The tree-down theory assumes they were tree climbers that leapt and glided among branches. Now, I do just want to point out here my own personal opinion as a believer in Jesus. I think God made the earth. I don't think birds evolved into an ability to fly. I think God made them with the ability to fly. That's my personal opinion. You can agree, you can disagree. I just feel like I have to put it in there. Okay. At field sites around the world, Ken Dial saw a pattern in how young pheasants, quail, tinamous, and other ground birds ran along behind their parents. They jumped up like popcorn, he said, describing how they would flap their half-formed wings and take short hops into the air. So when a group of graduate students challenged him to come up with new data on the age-old ground-up tree-down debate, he designed a project to see what clues might lie in how baby game birds learn to fly. Ken settled on the chukar partridge as a model species, but he might not have made his discovery without a key piece of advice from the local rancher in Montana who was supplying him with birds. When the cowboy stopped by to see how things were going, Ken showed him his nice, tidy laboratory setup and explained how the birds' first hops and flights would be measured. The rancher was incredulous. He took one look and said, in pretty colorful language, "What are those birds doing on the ground? They hate to be on the ground. Give them something to climb on." At first, it seemed unnatural. Ground birds don't like the ground. But as he thought about it, Ken realized that all the species he'd watched in the wild preferred to rest on ledges, low branches, and other elevated perches where they were safe from predators. They really only used the ground for feeding and traveling. So he brought in some hay bales for the chukars to perch on, and then left his son in charge of feeding and data collection while he went away on a short work trip. Barely a teenager at the time, young Terry Dial was visibly upset when his father got back. "I asked him how it went," Ken recalled, and he said, "Terrible. The birds are cheating. Instead of flying out to their perches, the baby chukars were using their legs." Time and again, Terry had watched them run right up the side of a hay bale, flapping all the while. Ken dashed out to see for himself, and that was the aha moment. "The birds were using their wings and legs cooperatively," he told me, and that single observation opened up a world of possibilities. Working together with Terry, who had since gone on to study animal locomotion, Ken came up with a series of ingenious experiments, filming the birds as they raced up textured ramps tilted at increasing angles. As the incline increased, the partridges began to flap, but they angled their wings differently from birds in flight. They aimed their flapping down and backward, using the force not for lift, but to keep their feet firmly pressed against the ramp. "It's like the spoiler on the back of a race car," he explained, which is a very apt analogy. In Formula One racing, spoilers are the big aerodynamic fins that push the cars downward as they speed along, increasing traction and handling. The birds were doing the very same thing with their wings to help them scramble up otherwise impossible slopes. Ken called this technique "wear," I guess is how that's pronounced, for wing-assisted incline running, and went on to document it in a wide range of species. It not only allowed young birds to climb vertical surfaces within the first few weeks of life, but also gave adults an energy-efficient alternative to flying. In the chukar experiments, adults regularly used wear to ascend ramps steeper than 90 degrees, essentially running up the wall and onto the ceiling. In an evolutionary context, wear takes on surprising explanatory powers. With one fell swoop, the Dials came up with a viable origin for the flapping flight stroke of birds, something gliding animals don't do, and thus a shortcoming of the tree-down theory, and an aerodynamic function for half-formed wings, one of the main drawbacks for the ground-up hypothesis. Okay, so we'll go up to the top, and we'll go through. Any questions you have? You guys know you can put up the hand emoji. Just feel free to unmute. I'm relaxed and I'm chill about it. So, any questions that you have about vocabulary, sentence structure, how it could be used in another context, if you've heard it before, etc. The goal of this time is to be able to acquire new vocabulary, have interactions with new vocabulary, have in, additional interactions with maybe vocabulary not super comfortable with or you haven't heard very much, so that it becomes very natural for you, not only to use and understand, but also to use and understand in lots of context and in American culture. So, first paragraph here. Scientists have long debated how the ancestors of birds evolved the ability to fly. The ground-up theory assumes they were fleet-footed ground dwellers that captured prey by leaping and flapping their upper limbs. The tree-down theory assumes they were tree climbers that leapt and glided among branches. So are there any questions for this first paragraph?
Yes, Ms. Alessandra, I want to ask, what is fleet-footed?
Fleet-footed. So the image that comes to mind is like being very quick on your feet. I will look it up though, because it is a particular vocabulary word to the context of birds, I believe. Yes, very nimble and fast on one's foot. You could probably use it in the context of like runners running a race, right? They're very fleet-footed.
And what is upper limbs?
Upper limbs. So limbs are like your arms, your legs, your appendages of your body. And so with a bird, right, it'd be their wings. And upper just means above. So our upper limbs are our arms.
So how do they lead their limbs?
How do they what?
Lead. They say the passage suggests that capture prey by leaping their limbs.
That's a good question. So although it would make sense to be like by leaping and flapping their upper limbs, it's the way it's read or understood anyways, is they're leaping separated and they're flapping their limbs. So they capture their prey by leaping, not connected to their limbs. They leap, right? Jump around. And they capture their prey by flapping their upper limbs. So the way it's understood is those are two separate things. Yeah, good question. That's good. Any others?
How about the glide?
So this is pronounced glided.
Oh, glided.
Good. So glided means, excuse me, I'm sorry. If you think of like an airplane flying, you could say an airplane glides. You think of a bird flying, the bird glides. It's often used in the sense of it's not flapping its wings, because that's like a motion, but more just soaring. It just is gliding. So yeah. You could also say like, it doesn't have to just be flying. If you think about an ice skater on the ice, like any smooth movement, so an ice skater on ice can glide on the ice, or a dancer could glide on the dance floor, like any really smooth action like that.
So Miss, can a surfer use glide? When you're surfing in the ocean, can you say like gliding in the ocean?
You probably could. I think people would mainly just use surfing, but you could say like glide on a wave. Yeah, like any of that like smooth motion. Yeah, that's good.
Hello, ma'am. How do you pronounce dwellers, or how to pronounce it? DWELLERS. The third line, on the third line, ground.
Oh, ground dwellers.
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 Yes. So it's not really the R sound, it's the W sound, the w wagon sound, right? So d like dog, and then w wagon, dwellers. Yep. So if you practice those two sounds separate and then you practice putting them together. Yep. Good. Anything else? All righty. Moving right along, we'll do our next paragraph. At field sites around the world, Ken Dial saw a pattern in how young pheasants, quail, tinamous, and other ground birds ran along behind their parents. They jumped up like popcorn, he said, describing how they would flap their half-formed wings and take short hops into the air. So when a group of graduate students challenged him to come up with new data on the age-old ground-up tree-down debate, he designed a project to see what clues might lie in how baby game birds learned to fly. Are there any in this one? This one doesn't seem as complicated, but there might be some questions in this one.
So on this, does run along means fly along?
Yes. In this case, the baby birds weren't technically flying yet, and so they're technically running and kind of jumping around and hopping about. So it's not technically flying in this context. It's running. Mm-hmm.
In the last sentence where it said baby game birds fly, why is game like the meaning of what type of meaning is game?
Good question. So normally we think of game like playing a game, right? A board game, a video game, some sort of outdoor active game with kids or something, sport. That doesn't make sense in this context, and that's not what it means in this context, right? A game bird, game means, in this context, when dealing with animals, means birds that you eat, animals that you eat. So hunters hunt game. Deer, right? Venison, turkey, pheasants. Yes. So in this context, in English, if you're taught, especially in hunting circles, if you're going to hunt your food, you're hunting game or you're trapping game.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Anything else? You guys are catching good ones.
Yes, ma'am. I have a question that is, with new data on the age-old ground up, three down debates, what is the meaning of that?
So in this context, it was talking up here how one theory is like ground up, the birds learn how to fly by like going on the ground, learning to flap their wings, hop up, and then they learned how to fly. The other theory is like they started up in trees and fell out enough times that they learned how to fly. So it's referring to that. In English, you can take like two topics that you're trying to connect and put dashes in between them, like you see here, age-old, ground-up, tree-down debate. And people will do this quite a bit in English and put those dashes in between that you technically, they're grammatically, I mean, it is grammatically correct. You can't do it, but technically it's not probably something you'd learn. But like someone will say, oh, I'm going to have a hard time thinking of an example. But like two topics, excuse me, that you're trying to compare, like two things that probably typically wouldn't go together, but you're putting together, you can put a dash between them and compare. I'm not going to be able to think of an example. I'm sorry. If some of you think of an example, you can help me out. This is one example, but anything that like isn't, you're comparing together, you can put a dash in between and say like this thing is in connection with that other thing. If I think of an example, I'll let you know. I'm sorry. Are there any other questions?
Second line, how young, Texan, quail, Tinamax. Yes, I don't know what that means.
So these are types of birds. So this one is pronounced pheasants. The PH makes the F sound. So pheasants. This one is pronounced quail. And I technically don't know how this one's pronounced. You can look it up in a dictionary. I'm pronouncing it tinamous, just from like phonetic spelling. So I assume that's how it's spelled. I don't actually know what kind of bird this is, but some type of bird that doesn't technically fly in the air very much. It's a ground bird. And some type of bird that people eat. So you're welcome to Google what kind of bird it is, but those are just types of birds that don't really fly in the air. They stay on the ground and people hunt them for food. Any others? Okay. Moving on to the next one. Let me see. I'm gonna try and get it all on one. There we go. One page. Ken settled on the chukar partridge as a model species, but he might not have made his discovery without a key piece of advice from the local rancher in Montana who was supplying him with birds. When the cowboy stopped by to see how things were going, Ken showed him his nice, tidy laboratory setup and explained how the bird's first hops and flights would be measured. The rancher was incredulous. He took one look and said in pretty colorful language, "What are those birds doing on the ground? They hate to be on the ground. Give them something to climb on." Any questions in this one?
Yeah. What is settle on?
Say it one more time.
Settled on.
Settled on. To settle on, I'm trying to find it. Why can't I find it? Settled on.
In the first line.
The first line. Thank you. Oh, you guys. Thank you. The reason I needed to see it is because I wanted to find it as like sitting on something, to settle, make yourself comfortable. But that's not what it means in this context. It means he decided on that he decided his research bird would be the chukar partridge. So to settle means to either make yourself comfortable, to sit and get cozy, or it means to decide on something. What else?
Miss, we also use settle on like in marriage, right?
Can you give me an example of what you mean?
In one of Adele's songs, I heard that you settled on with another girl, like that.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted an example is like people will say they settle, meaning you have a high standard. You want your spouse to have these certain qualities and traits, right? To be this level of, standard of a type of person that they are. And then you settle, you lower your standards and you say, okay, well, maybe they don't do this thing, or maybe they don't have that character trait, or maybe they don't have this job or this, whatever. And so you settle, you lower your standard. So yeah, you can use it in that sense too. People talk about that a lot. Good. What else? Yes, Mamie asks.
The rancher was incredulous.
Incredulous, this one?
Incredulous, yeah. The rancher was incredulous.
Yes. Incredulous means like shocked, amazed, can't believe your eyes. Just like can't even believe that would be true. You're incredulous. I'll try and look up like a true definition. But that's how people use it, is like you can't even believe it. You can't, yes, unwilling or unable to believe something. You just, how could you do that? And it's often in this like exclamatory sense of not just like, oh, that's hard to believe, I'm skeptical, but like, what is happening? Yeah.
So, Miss, that is incredulous positive or negative?
What's what?
Incredulous, is it positive or negative?
In this context, is negative. Because he's just like, how could you be so dumb? Give the bird something to climb on. He can't believe the scientist didn't know that. I'm trying to think if it could be used positively. I suppose it could be sort of neutral, of like maybe someone put on some type of show or some sort of art piece. And you're just so incredulous that they could even make that like you're just so amazed. You just can't even believe that that's a painting and not a photograph. Right. So I guess that's like a positive sense of like you're incredulous that they made that painting that looks like a photograph. So I guess it could be used positively.
Teacher, is that the word come from incredible?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Why did
That's okay. Nick, go ahead and say what you were going to say, and I'll come back to you, Angel. Okay.
Miss why did the author use like pretty colorful language?
Yes. Yes, good question. Thank you for asking. So what that is referring to is that he was using swear words. He was cussing. And obviously, right, this is from a book. It's used in academic settings. And so oftentimes authors won't want to actually use those swear words in their writing. And so they have to somehow let the reader know that he's not speaking politely or using words that you can say just in common public. And so pretty colorful language, right? Colorful language means it's you are cussing. Yep, good question. Angel, what's your question? Thank you for your patience.
So rancher.
Say it one more time.
Rancher.
Rancher.
Yeah.
A rancher is like a farmer, but usually does not grow crops unless maybe they grow feed for cattle. And the rancher either like raises like cattle, cows, or a rancher for the purpose of killing them for food, or a rancher raises like horses for the purpose of like working or all sorts of different things. So rancher like has herds of, or maybe you could be like a buffalo rancher. Some types of herds of animals, domestic animals, that you don't, like a farmer also has animals, right? But they don't have near the amount a rancher has. And they also like grow food and things. Ranchers don't, unless maybe they grow some hay or feed or alfalfa or something for their animals. Good question. Any others? All right. Let's keep it moving. Sorry, I keep coughing. At first, it seemed unnatural. Ground birds don't like the ground. But as he thought about it, Ken realized that all the species he'd watched in the wild preferred to rest on ledges, low branches, and other elevated perches where they were safe from predators. They really only used the ground for feeding and traveling. So he brought in some hay bales for the chukars to perch on, and then left his son in charge of feeding and data collection while he went away on a short work trip. Any questions from this one?
Yes, Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Branches and parts are the same.
Branches and perches, are those the same?
Yeah.
Okay. Branch, sorry?
Are they the same?
A branch is like a tree branch, you know? A perch is something you can sit on. So technically, yes, a branch can be a perch, but a perch is not always a branch, right? A perch can also be like the edge of a chair or the edge of a bed, and you perch like you're sitting upon it.
So perch, we can sit on perch.
Yes. So a perch is just something you sit upon, and usually it's like this small little space. Perch as a verb means to just sort of, you have this small little space to just like kind of sit upon it. So I might perch upon my student's desk, right? It's just a small little space. I'm just sitting down for a moment and then I'm standing back up and going about what I'm doing, right? In the bird world, right, a perch might be a telephone line, right? Very small little space, and it's just perching there, right? So it can be a verb or a noun.
I got it. Thank you.
Mhm. Anything else?
Miss,
Yes.
brown birds don't like the grounds, and then why did the other put comma? No, question mark.
Question mark. Good question. I was wondering that myself. I think the reason they put a question mark there, technically it shouldn't be a question mark. You're correct. I think the reason they put a question mark there is to make it sound how you would say it, right? You would say it like ground birds don't like the ground. Like you're wondering that. You're like, why would they want something to climb on? They don't like the ground. So it's something you're wondering. But technically it is not a question. But that's why they put the question mark there.
So can we use that writing style in like formal writing, like when we write
I
an
think
essay?
you could say it, you could use it in informal writing. If you're writing a college paper, I probably wouldn't.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, teacher. I have one question. Yes. Hey, please for the chuka. I don't know. What does it mean?
Yes. It's a type of bird. So up, excuse me, up here it says that he settled on the chukar partridge as his model species, meaning he decided for this type of bird, the chukar partridge, to be the bird, the species that he's going to study. So if you'd like to Google it, you can. I'm not sure what kind of bird that is, but it's some type of bird that lives on the ground. Good question. Any others?
What are hay bales?
Ooh, good question. Hay bales are, excuse me, right? So ranchers or farmers grow hay. It's what your cattle, your horses, some other animals eat. It's like a type of grass. And so in harvest season, they go out and they harvest the hay and they bring them into bales. And bales can either be round and like huge. They're really, really big. They're like, probably 5-6 feet tall in diameter, right? So then you think about that circumference. They're pretty wide too, probably about the same width as well. Anyways, and so they can be round, and it's basically just the hay that's been all collected and wrapped up and kind of condensed down. And usually there's some sort of netting or something that ties it together. Sometimes it's just string. Hay bales can also be square and rectangle. When they're rectangular, they're usually a bit smaller, 3 by 4 feet-ish type of deal, compared to the big round ones. But it's just how they like collect the dried, harvested hay, condense it down, and then they'll let it dry out in the field. So like where I live, right, there's tons of farms all around me. During harvest time, tons of hay bales everywhere, just out on the field all the time. They all dry out, and then they stack them in their barns and sheds, and then they feed on it all winter. Good question.
In Myanmar, we don't we don't stack them. We don't stack the hay up. We just pile them up.
Okay, you just tie them up. Is it like a big like bale like that, or is it smaller?
It's like a small hill.
Okay.
We just pile them up.
Okay. Yeah. They're like small. We have like machines. What is it called? I can't remember. A baler, I think is what they call it. And it's like little machines, and they cut it all down, right, with all their other tools, but then they go around. I think it's called a baler, and like with their tractor, and it like takes it all like condenses it down. So like we used to use hay bales for like archery because it would stop the arrows because it was like really thick and condensed. Yeah. Okay, any other questions from this paragraph? All righty, let's keep moving. Okay. Barely a teenager at the time, young Terry Dial was visibly upset when his father got back. I asked him how it went, Ken recalled, and he said, "Terrible. The birds are cheating. Instead of flying up to their perches, the baby chukars were using their legs, tied and again, Terry had watched them run right up the side of the hay bale, flapping all the while. Ken dashed out to see for himself, and that was the aha moment. Any questions?
Yes, tie him again, teacher, please.
Say it one more time.
Tie him again. The second paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
The fourth, yeah.
And again. Yes, that is a phrase that means over and over. That means once and twice and a third time. Time and again. The first time and again the second time. Mm-hmm. And that's a common phrase. You can use that in any case, any situation in which you're saying more than once. Time and again, I went to the store. Time and again, I did my homework. Time and again. Yep.
Yeah.
Hello, teacher.
Yes.
Can you tell me about dash out?
Tell you about what?
Dash out from the below second line.
The second line here?
No. In second line from the below.
This one?
Can dash out.
Oh, dash out. I'm sorry. For some reason, my computer, I couldn't decipher the sounds. Thank you for your patience. Excuse me. Dashed out means you ran out. You sprinted to run. Dash means you moved very quickly and out right outside. Mm-hmm. Yep, very common word, to dash about. Any others?
So, Miss, is all the while and all the time the same in this context?
Yep. Yes. I think in all contexts, all the while and all the time mean the same thing. Yeah. Good question. You guys are doing good. You guys have good questions today, making lots of connections. Any others? Did you have a question, Margaret?
Yes, Chair. Can we use barely on the middle of the sentence? Like, I have a heart disease, so I barely eat only rice. I barely eat rice.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Barely means just barely. A little bit. Hardly can do it.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Angel, did you have a question?
Yeah. The meaning of aha moment is mean surprise.
Not a surprise. Not necessarily a surprise, but more like you made a connection. So there is this sense of surprise about it, but it's more like, oh, aha, I understand now. That's what it's talking about. Anything else?
Miss, why did the author use like flying up? Can we just say flying, or before that there was also a line in the paragraph like climbing on. Can we just use climb?
Mm-hmm. Well, so yes, you can just say instead of flying to their perches. I think the reason they excuse me. I think the reason they add the word up is to make this distinction that they're ground birds, and instead of flying up to their perches, they're running. So they're trying to make this distinction of like all the way down here up to their perches. You technically don't need that word. So if you were trying to get rid of words, you don't need it. But I think they're trying to make a big point that it's up high because they're trying to describe how they learned how to fly. Same with climbing on. You said that it was in a different paragraph, huh? I'm not sure where it was, but probably same thing. You can use climbing, but they're just trying to make this distinction that it's on to something. A lot of times in English, we use a lot of little words that probably aren't super important, but it just like, it's kind of how English flows. Okay, any others?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
And how about the cheating usage in this first sentence? Because I also know that cheating is used in the relationship, right? So how about the terrible, the bad, or cheating? Yeah. I want to
Yes, very good. So this is not cheating and like cheating on your boyfriend or your girlfriend, right? This is cheating in like on a test, right? You're getting the answers and you're cheating and you're not actually doing your work. So in this sense, this barely teenager, this young kid is saying the birds are cheating. They're supposed to be flying. They're not flying. They're running and using their legs instead of flying, right? And flapping. So it's just referring to, you're supposed to be doing it this way, right? You're supposed to be taking your test, and instead someone told you the answers. You're supposed to be flying, and instead you're running, you know? So it's just referring to that type of cheating. Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Are there any others? Okay, doke. Let's move to the next paragraph. It says, the birds were using their wings and legs cooperatively, he told me, and that single observation opened up a world of possibilities. Working together with Terry, who has since gone on to study animal locomotion, Ken came up with a series of ingenious experiments, filming the birds as they raced up textured ramps tilted at increasing angles. As the incline increased, the partridges began to flap, but they angled their wings differently from birds in flight. They aimed their flapping down and backward, using the force not for lift, but to keep their feet firmly pressed against the ramp. Do you have any questions in this one?
What does ingenious means? A series of ingenious experiments.
I'm sorry. Ingenious means like, it almost means genius. Ingenious means like new, unthought of, very smart. I'm gonna look up an actual definition. Oh, why won't it just hang on? Yeah, like clever, original, inventive. So you thought up on your own this really smart experiment. What else?
Miss, cooperatively.
Say it one more time.
Cooperatively. This on the second
Cooperatively.
line.
Yes, to work together, to cooperate. Yeah, work together. Anything else?
How about the came up and raised up the present verbs? Yes,
say it one more time.
Came up and raised up this present verb. Yeah. In the fifth
This one
sentence.
can came up.
Yeah. Came up and also raised up.
This one raced up.
Yeah, both.
Okay.
Both. Yeah.
Yes. So Ken came up with a series of ingenious experiments. Ken thought up, he thought, really, is what it is. I'm trying to think if there's another way you could describe that. Came up. Maybe decided on, but not really decided. It's more that he thought or created. So he came up with an idea. It's usually when you use the word, excuse me, usually when you use the word came up, It's like you're thinking about something. So you came up with an idea, you thought of an idea, you created an idea. Otherwise, came up means like you walked up to someone or something, right? But in this context, it's his thoughts. So he created this ingenious experiment. And then raced up, raced means to like run. And so they're running up the ramps at these angles. To race means to run really fast. Now, normally race means that you're competing with someone else when you're running. This one, they're not competing. Race can also mean like dash, right? To just run super quickly, to go as fast as you can. Anything else?
Hello, teacher.
Hi.
Your subline opens up a world of possibility.
This means the world of possibilities, means anything is possible. American culture, because we're like have an individualism culture, the Americans often think that like they can do anything they want, that any world is open to them, and if they think of that world or they think of that dream, they can achieve that dream, they can make that thing happen. And so that's what it's referring to. If you get to like the basis of American culture, is that there's a world of possibilities, and if you just could open that door or think of that thing or imagine that dream, or you know, in this case, see an observation, right? Make an observation. Suddenly, this world has opened to you that you can discover all sorts of new things. In his case, he can figure out how the birds learned how to fly, right? You can also say opened up a world of possibilities of like, okay, I got my teaching certificate. That has opened a world of possibilities. I can teach first grade through sixth grade. I can teach anywhere in the United States. I can, you know, on and on, right? So it just means that you have lots of opportunities to succeed or figure something out, etc.
I use this when I want to encourage someone.
Say it again.
Can I use this word, a word of possibility, when I want to encourage someone?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's very encouraging. Anything else?
This birds in flight. Is it mean that birds who can fly? That birds that can fly?
Yes.
Sure. What does the mean texture ramp tilted?
Textured ramps tilted. So textured means that it's rough, it's not a smooth surface, so the birds don't slip when they run. So it's textured. You can use this in really anything. As long as something's not smooth, it's textured. So the cloth on my bin is textured, it's not smooth, right? However, the book binding is very smooth, so it's not textured, right? It's smooth. Ramps is just like a flat plane that is tilted at an angle. So like instead of being flat, you know, ground, it's a ramp that goes up. Oftentimes you use ramps on the road to go up to a new, like a higher road, right? A bridge or something. Ramps can be used like when I was a kid and my family moved, we had we had a driveway that was like an 80-degree angle almost. And so we had to put down ramps to change that incline so that the car could get up the driveway. So it's just something that's at an incline. And tilted means that there's like an angle, same thing. Any others?
Miss, I feel like something is missing on the in the paragraph. Like they aim their flapping down and backward.
Hmm.
Like, is it supposed to be like they aim their wings flapping down and backward?
You could add that in. You don't have to, because it's saying, as the incline increased, the partridges began to flap. And the implied is obviously they're flapping their wings. What else would they flap? And they angled their wings differently from birds in flight. They aimed their flapping, again, implied, they're flapping their wings. They aimed their flapping down and backwards. So it's implied wings, so you don't have to put it in, because it's really talking about the action of flapping their wings, not the wings themselves. Good question. If it was talking about the wings themselves, then you would have to put in the wings. But since it's talking about that motion, it doesn't matter. It's implied. Anything else? Alrighty, let's move on. Okay. It's like the spoiler on the back of a race car, he explained, which is a very apt analogy. In Formula One racing, spoilers are the big aerodynamic fins that push the cars downward as they speed along, increasing traction and handling. The birds were doing the very same thing with their wings to help them scramble up otherwise impossible slopes. Any questions for this one?
A very apt analogy.
It means an analogy that makes sense, that it fits perfectly. To be apt, like, is aptitude, which means like your ability is just right. Like you have an aptitude to do something. It comes very naturally to you. So I have an aptitude to work with children, right? It's very natural for me, and it's not hard at all. It's very, that's how I was made. So you might be have an aptitude for science, an aptitude for something else, right? And so that's what it's referring to. Is it's like very proper. It just makes sense. It's very natural that the same way the birds are flapping their wings is the exact same way the race car works. It's a very apt. It works perfectly.
So, Miss, is apt a word, or does it have any long forms?
Well, the long form would be aptitude, but I do think apt is a word by itself. Let me check. Because aptitude is like a noun, like it's something you possess, but apt is more like you're apt to do that thing. Aptitude might be, okay, let me look. Apt is an adjective, and then let me look up what aptitude is. I think it might be a noun. Yes, aptitude is the noun and apt is the adjective.
And what is analogy?
An analogy is like a comparison. Let me look up a formal definition, because like there's metaphors and there's similes and there's personification and there's like all sorts of things that you like can compare things with. An analogy, so I want to give you like a proper definition. An analogy is a comparison that talks about similarities. Okay, I guess it's not specific enough. Okay, I guess an analogy must be a broader term than like a metaphor or a, parable or something. So an analogy just means you're comparing two things.
In this passage, analogy is the comparison between cars and birds.
Yes. In the same way that the bird flaps their wings is the same way that the, what is it called? Spoiler works to control the car. Yeah. Any others?
So, Miss, in this context, like it's like the spoiler in the back of a race car. So spoiler, is it mean like a thing, a stuff, or is it like a concept, like when you watch movies, like the spoiler?
Oh, good question. So no, a spoiler is a thing, and it defines what it is right here. A spoiler is if you ever seen a Formula race car, a Formula race car is like a normal race car, and then it has like these big fins on the back of it that like stick out and poke up, and they're like wide. And so it's saying that's what a spoiler is. And so it's like big aerodynamic fins, and it is able to push that car down so that as they speed along, they don't go flying everywhere, but they are able to stay to the ground. Yeah. Any others?
Sure. Slope here, the slope meanings of slope is equal to the ramp.
Down here is what you're talking about?
Yes. It's also it's the same meaning with ramp.
Yes. Yes. Let me think. So a ramp is an object that is sloped or has an incline, right? And it's an object that like connects that slope. A slope can be an object, like a ramp can be sloped, or you can say a mountain slope. But a slope more refers to the concept of being on an incline, down a mountain or up a mountain or up or down a ramp. A slope more refers to that concept of an incline or an angle, whereas a ramp is an object that is on an incline or an angle. Yeah. Good connection. You guys are smart. Are there any other?
Yeah, scramble up. Is this like scrambling a paper?
That's like crumple up paper. To scramble up, if you imagine like a rock climber climbing very quickly up a rock, or you imagine like a little squirrel or gopher or something like climbing up a tree or something, that's scrambling.
Miss, why is otherwise used in the?
Yes, thank you for asking this question. So here's how you read it. The birds were doing the very same thing with their wings to help them scramble up otherwise impossible slopes. So if they weren't using their wings, then they would not be able to scramble up the slopes. Otherwise means like if the first thing isn't true, then the second thing can't be possible. So it's saying that they have to use their wings. Otherwise, the slope is impossible to climb. You can't climb up a 90-degree angle, right?
So Miss, otherwise is used as a transition.
Yes.
So like, is it true grammatically? Like, do we need to put like semicolon now or comma?
Good question. You do not, because it's not being used as a transition here, because this is not a sentence. When you use a semicolon and a comma is when you're putting two simple sentences together into a compound sentence, right? And so it's not being used as a transition here. It's being used as saying that unless the first thing's true, then the second thing isn't true, right? If they don't use their wings, then they cannot climb the slopes, right? So it's one ways that you can use otherwise, but it's not being used as a transition. So good connection there. Yeah. And people do use this type of language in English, that saying, right, my students could complete their math test or after learning division, my students could complete their otherwise impossible or too difficult math test, right? So now that they know the new information, they can do the math test or something like that. So people use this type of language saying they're otherwise blah 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 whatever. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
So Miss, if we want to use otherwise in that exact same way, we must so like you know, do we need to put a noun after otherwise and nothing else?
yeah.
Only noun.
Yes, unless you're using it as a transition. You can use it as a transition in two sentences, making it a compound sentence. But if you're using it like this, it just is a noun. Or in this case, it's an adjective, impossible, right? And then the noun slopes. Yeah. Yeah, good question. Anything else? All right, we'll go ahead. Excuse me. We'll go ahead and pause there. I'll stop sharing my screen. I can see all of you all now. We'll read our scripture and we'll pray and then be dismissed. Thank you for engaging so well today. When I was picking this passage, I was like, well, there's some interesting concepts, there's some interesting vocabulary, but like not every single word, right? Many of those words were very easy. And so thank you for really digging in deep. You guys made really good connections to not only how it was used in that context, but also how you can use it every day. You made really good connections between like multi-meaning words that I didn't even notice. So excellent job. I'm very impressed. Y'all are so smart. Okay. Hey.
Miss, can I interrupt, please?
Yes, please.
Can I have the link or like?
Yes, thank you for saying that. I always forget. Yes, never hesitate to interrupt. You always can. Let me do that. The link. All right, I'll put it in the chat for you. Okay. There you go. Thank you. I'm sorry I keep coughing. I'm fine. You know, like at the end of a cold and you just keep coughing and coughing. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for your prayers. Okay, today I'm going to read, hopefully it's not too long. It shouldn't be too long. But as I was reading, I was like, but I also have to read this verse and this verse and this verse. So I'm just going to read them all. It's from 1 John chapter 4, and it's all about God's